another edition to Black Health Unfiltered. Sorry for the late delay today. We had a little bit of technical difficulties setting up. We wanted to have a change of scenery, a different feel to the episode, but we will figure it out. We will come to you, and we hopefully have our guest back with us again. My name is Dr. Akeem Stewart, and I'd like to welcome to you to our second show for Black Health Unfiltered on this wonderful Sunday, the 12th of October. And we have an opportunity today to speak about community health and the importance of community health through the eyes of a physician. Not only a physician that is based on a clinical sense, but has a diverse background in community work, social work, and really and truly his call to medicine is is not the what you would say the norm amongst all of us, but more of a case of it came with a sense of social responsibility and the want to be in a better place to be able to help our community. So today, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Kirk Stewart. This episode, we should call it Stewart Squared, but we are not family at all. We just happen to fall in the same place at the same time, and I've had the opportunity to really sit down and have a discussion and learn from this man right here, and he has helped me grow so much in my career when it comes to medicine. So I'm really today's conversation. So I'm going to give Kirk a little opportunity to speak about himself before we dive into the thick of things.
Yeah, because I love doing that. So, I'm Kirk. Unless you're my patient, you could continue to call me Kirk. I'm also known as Dr. Stewart. I'm a physician in Bowmanville or Durham region. I have my own practice in Bowmanville, and just happy to be a part of the whole effort to have community medicine be a focal point in today's time. And my background, I guess, the best way to summarize, and I guess we'll probably go in a little bit more detail. I first started out in community sciences or child and youth worker way back in the day when it was something big in Toronto in high schools, and it's still big, in terms of working community. But from there, I went ahead and I went overseas to Australia, did some work there, got a bachelor's in community welfare, and then came back, ran a shelter, and it was a youth shelter down in Toronto. And just the experience from that led me to realize that I need to do more. As much as you're doing community work and, from the social sciences perspective, seems to always have limitations as to how much you could give and how much you could do. So over time, it's a few people who encouraged me to, reach for the stars, as they would have it, and led me into medicine. I also have a background in the military. I was a military officer. I was a paratrooper for 13 years, and there's a lot that came with that too in terms of understanding how people think. Because when you're in the military, you meet a lot of different types of people, and I really appreciate that experience, and amongst many others. But God's blessed me to have the opportunity to mix everything together, and I think I'm just blessed, people like Akeem and a whole bunch of my other colleagues that, just seeing how they work motivates me to want to work even harder when it comes to community work.
Oh, well, thank you. Mm-hmm. And although that may have seemed long, he barely brushed the surface on all of the things that he's been doing. But one thing you said, that you had the opportunity to leave, and then you went to Australia, studied a bit, came back here,
Mm-hmm.
and you ran the youth shelter. So within that, you saw the need to be more involved on how you can. How did that influence you see that need? Like, where can you take us a little bit through the steps and the processes that you had to go through to get to where you are within medicine?
Yeah.
Starting from there.
Yeah. So, getting into medicine. So it's been a trip because I say this without any disrespect. I don't think how medicine's set up it's meant for someone like me. I got into medicine at a very old age, if you would put it that way. Usually people get into medicine, what would we say, like 23, 24, yeah, because they would have done med school and residency and whatnot. I got in, I think I was 29, so later on. And I think things have changed now, but at the time, I was the anomaly, or the older person that's just like, okay, sure, we'll have you join in. But no, it was hard. It was hard. So when I went to Australia and I came back, I spent time as the general manager for a shelter in Toronto, a youth shelter. They don't have it anymore. And like I was saying, just saw a lot of different types of people. What really drove me into it, there's a physician, I won't mention her name. She's amazing. She's over in BC now, but she volunteered her time to the shelter after we reached out to her to say, we have some kids there, they need dental, they need medical, they need some mental health support, they need physical exams. Can you help us? And she was a pediatrician at Sick Kids, and she put her hand up and she's like, yeah, we'll come through and work with us at the shelter. And she was just so passionate, compassionate. The kids loved her. She made it so easy to work with, and she understood them. She listened to them. She listened to the staff, and that was the first time I ever seen a physician like this, where they were very approachable and they were willing to listen and sit, understand what we're going through. And mind you, before she came, we've had encounters with the emergency department. As a general manager, I hosted a lot of calls from the local emergency department asking, why is this kid here again? Or we discharge them. Aren't you guys taking care of it? Just not understanding what goes with homelessness and being, under 24, not having any resources and things like this. But the experience that I had with a physician towards the end, because it was a piloted project, she said to me, hey man, I think you should be a doctor. And I chuckled as hard as I could. And I thought she was playing around. She goes, no, I think seeing how the kids, seeing how you interact with them, I think it's very important that you consider this as a career. And I think it would have been at least 3 to 4 years after I sat on it, and then one day I couldn't sleep, and I told my wife, hey, rough night, and I usually sleep well, but I wasn't sleeping then, and it became something that bothered me for a good 6 months. Like, I wasn't sleeping because this thing bothered me. What if I'm missing out on that opportunity? So I went and I applied to McMaster, and I didn't get in because I didn't understand at the time how hard it was for people to get into medicine. And it's still hard, but at that time I felt, because I didn't have a science background, didn't have any resources, no contact with anybody, I think I underestimated how challenging it was. And I had a friend who I did security with when I was like school, and he went off to do medicine. He went the Caribbean, and he finished up, did residency, or he was in his 3rd year. And I reached out to him and said, hey man, I try to apply to McMaster, didn't get in. What do you think? Like, do I apply again? He goes, listen, I think you should go ahead and come to the Caribbean, do the whole pathway. And I'm like, okay. Again, I know nothing about what's going on, but I felt, because I couldn't sleep, at least this would give me some sleep, right? If I fall through with something. And I went to St. Vincent. I was in the St. James School of Medicine program. That program, how it's set up, it's literally, you learn on your own, you fend for yourself, you figure things out, which I'm that type of person where I actually appreciate being able to, hey, go figure this out. And as they would have it, the rest is history. I followed through with the system in the States. I did my clinicals in Chicago, did my residency through University of Illinois. I had 3 postings, one in Chicago, one in Dixon, Illinois, and another one in Rockford. Spent 3 years in residency, background in rural medicine with a focus on obstetrics under family medicine. And that's where I started to see what, as a physician, what I could do. Because in rural medicine, you don't have too many resources. Like where I was in Illinois, we were the hub for that area. So we, by nature of that, we had more resources. But even then, how we were trained, we weren't allowed to just refer out. Even as a family doctor, I had to sit with the case. I had to spend time thinking like the cardiologist or the general surgeon. And as a result of that, doing rural medicine, I had to learn a lot of things because you don't have the resources available. And that's kind of like the spirit of community medicine in my mind, where things are not always clear. You're working with different types of people. You're working with systems that are not necessarily designed to attend to certain people. you don't have resources, you're still trying to figure things out, policies are always changing, government's always changing. And so with that type of ingenuity in rural medicine, I've kind of converted that over. And it was a nice mix for me, knowing my background in community services, if you want to put it that way. And that's where I've been building. That's how I got into this stream of doing medicine in Bowmanville or Durham region.
So, and then when we look at it this way, we think about community medicine, community health, right? It is not the non-traditional sense of Western medicine, right? Especially, you did make the statement that medicine is not made for people like me. You're referring to those of the Afro-Caribbean Black community, right? Especially if you could see here in North America and in different places around the world, the history of medicine had never really given the opportunity for us to be part of the process that wasn't being elaborate, more or less, or being a test subject, right? And that could be seen throughout history. So now you sit down, you have the opportunity to make it applicable to those, your Black counterpart, women, men, and children of our community. How then do you think, how do you go outside of that non-traditional sense and make it that people feel welcoming? Like, how do you apply that community aspect to it? I know you had the background in rural, and I could recognize that as a physician who was trained in Cuba. Everything was rural, more or less. If you were in Havana, it was more or less rural, so you had to do with what you had. But I personally have seen what community does when it interlinks with health. So like now you bring this to the North American space where we weren't much as to be considered at one point, not even as human. So how now do you make that those who come in to you through your pathway, rather it be from the community or outside the community, tell them this is what is the truth about family medicine, this is the truth about community? How do you merge that? You've seen how it is, but how do you merge that? Like, how do you speak to them?
Yeah, so I must say this. When I was in Dixon, Illinois, it was probably the most welcoming experience. I realized that, so this Dixon, Illinois is like, that's where they call it the corn central for Canada.
Yes.
Sorry, for the states, because all the corns there. If you drive in between Illinois to, whether it's southern, you're going south to Indiana, or you're heading over to Kansas or whatnot, pure cornfields. So naturally, you're gonna have Anglo-Saxon Caucasians, and so they call this the Midwest. So when I lived there, I was there for 3 years, and nothing but love. Like, it was an amazing experience, and it wasn't fitting the bill that I thought I would experience, especially because I'm a COVID resident, right? So I was expecting that cultural influence, some of the this is that we had around culture and race and all that. I thought I would experience it, and I didn't. But I think the reason why I didn't was that place understood culture and community, right? I wasn't the only Black doctor there. We actually had a contingency of Canadians that was probably 50-50 for the doctors that way. It was very impressive, and maybe that's why a lot of Canadians went there. But I saw how they connected, like the physicians there. Not only did they see patients in their own practice, they were covering the OB shifts, so, which is not necessarily the case in Canada, where back in the day, you used to have it where the doctor would deliver you. The same family doctor you would see in the office, they would be the ones delivering in the hospital. They don't really have that anymore. There was that. They were a part of the public health system there. They were part of the school system there. They were part of almost every system in the community, because they maintain, interestingly, the traditional version of physicians. If you look at the history of medicine, doctors were not always the prestigious position that we have it in society. In fact, they were just people who really cared about people living, and they would dedicate their lives to it. And over time, things happened to where it's where it is right now. But I found that that experience enhanced my awareness of community. Then when I came back to Toronto, what did it me was, in terms of merging it, and I say this with all respect to everybody, I didn't care. I was a physician. I took an oath to take care of people. I understood my license and what the limitations were, and I really wanted to expand as much as I can and do what I can with that license. And I was just going to do whatever I can to provide care to the community. And so I took elements of work that I did in the background, knowing how the government system works here around funding, around some of the policies that are in place for communities, individuals. I started to study and understand how Durham region, for example, how they're set up in terms of their community structure. I connected with people in the community. So I would go out. I'm not, anybody who knows my practice, you would see me at a community fair. I'm setting up shop. We're doing checking blood pressures. We're doing one-on-one talks about individuals' health. I'm, doing a workshop around diabetes, because I felt when you do community work, what worked for me back then was to be able to touch people and talk to people and have that connection. That's how I've been able to practice now, where I don't want to tell you, oh, you should be checking your blood pressure, checking your type 2 diabetes, but then I can't relate. You can't relate to me. I can't relate to you. There's a huge wall of professionalism and prestige and all that separates. So how I practice and how I try to work with people, and it's not always pretty. And that's the other thing I'll say about community work. It's rarely ever seamless and pretty and structured. It's usually where, I wouldn't say lines are blurred, but there's a give and take. So to build that trust, there's a guard that needs to be brought down. People need to be able to look you eye to eye and make those connections versus, okay, this person's high and mighty. And it doesn't mean that you're not professional. It just means that you add that human element to things. And I think that's how I've been able to do it. Being able to go out there, connect with the community, and build an understanding of how medicine can be around that. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, that's pretty, because when we look at it, we got to humanize what the doctors
Absolutely.
are, right? And I think that when we look at the system, a lot of doctors, people like we as doctors, we tend to not realize that this is a customer service role in a way when you really look at it, because we're there to serve those who come to us. We're there to help them to better understand their own health. So we tend to get frustrated when we speak about what we have to tell them, and they don't take that information and bring it in and go with it like it's law. But then we have to understand, as you said, we have to be able to connect with those who we are trying to bring a service to, right? Though you come here from my professionalism or my professional advice, I need to be able to connect with you, right? And you need to be able to see what's the importance of my word to your life. So that takes me to ask you, like, where do you see the importance of what I would call, or what would be named as a lifestyle prescription, and then within that lifestyle prescription, the importance of having the culture of affirming care embedded in that idea?
Yeah, so it's a tough one for me, because while I due to the connecting with the community, especially in the Ajax, where we have a high number, a dense populated area of Black people, my practice, it's wide range of people. I'm also active up north with the indigenous communities and whatnot. What I think happens when it comes to making that connection, while it's important to approach it from a cultural perspective, I think individually that also should be maintained. So what do I mean by that? So, you could say this person is from the Caribbean, specifically, let's say Trinidad, and you might understand their culture, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that just because they're Trinidadian, it doesn't mean that's all they are, right? So I almost see it as you have a reference to start the conversation with, but you still have to go and find out who they are and what they're about as an individual. When it comes to how I approach, and I'm say this, I don't know if I have it correct. I don't know if I'm doing this thing at a level that's the best way to do it. But I find that when you're doing work where you're trying to connect with people and you're trying to relate to people, it throws them off guard. It throws them off guard.
It's true.
Because you'll ask questions and they're like, wait, you can't ask me that question. And I'll give you an example, or not just questions, but make a statement. A person would come in and they're upset that, their health is not going well. And they project that onto me. And I would be like, okay, so as you're coming in, is how you want to have the relationship going into the first encounter, let's say, that we're having. They're like, wait, what's happening? the doctor's not supposed to talk to me like that. But I think that's important to kind of make that not barrier, but that boundary clear. And what I try to do with patients, I try to let them know that I'm not here to waste your time. I'm not here, while I understand your culture and all these different things, I want you to know that I'm here present in this 15-20 minute time frame that I want us to lock into your health. And your health might be something as simple, you just want to come in and just chill. Because some people, they're not ready to address certain things. But I think what tends to happen is we're used to, in North America, this politeness that goes beyond addressing the things that are in place that will tend not to get the chance to stop, and it's a challenge for them. And that's a big part of community work, because if you're doing community work, you're going to have those hard conversations. And I try to have them within reason, be understanding of the person, but I don't shy away from those experiences where I want people to understand that, hey, we still have to have that respect, and that's a big thing. When it comes to lifestyle changes and things like, we talk about diet, for example, we talk about socioeconomic status and things like this. Like I said, I think it's important to really check in with a person first and understand, ask a lot of questions. That's another thing that we don't do enough of in medicine, because we don't have that much time to. But I think that's very important, and that's like the gateway to provide care. Asking tons of, if it's something that you feel you're not clear on, ask about it. Even if you hear something from the person that you're working with and it might sound like it's you understand, it's always good to check in with them and make sure the answer is correct to their liking. But I think that's the biggest part of it when we talk about lifestyle and
like so prescription. And then because like we want to be part of it, we want to be able to give them the opportunity to say, hey, like this is happening to me, but establishing that boundaries, like come in here so I can help you. Right? I know the frustration you're being, so we want to create that space. And one thing about the lifestyle prescription that I would have seen you've done in your practice is not allowing it to just be within the office, right? Is a between community outreach, and you made mention to going out to different areas and having different events, but diving a little bit more into that, like, because I know it's not as easy as just setting up a shop somewhere and say, hey, people come on, right?
But let me tell you this. This is actually a good start to because I found what we haven't addressed in medicine is what happened over COVID. And Akeem, I'm telling you this right now. I think haven't rebuilt the trust from the medical community back to the community at large. I can't tell you how many times, whether I'm out doing a public health thing or in my own practice, we have people that are not trusting medicine, period, in general, right?
Oh, yeah, we see now with measles outbreaks in 2025.
That's right. That's right. I said to a patient, speaking of measles, I said a patient came in and I was in urgent care a couple months ago, and they're like, hey, does this look like measles? And I said to her, ma'am, I have no idea what measles look like, because I'm not supposed to know what it looks like. We shouldn't be talking about measles now, right? But the thing is, I think that's a big part of what we haven't paused on. We, as a provider, as a community of providers, I think we haven't paused to say, hey, listen, there's a huge distrust out there for the healthcare field, and where some providers have been able to rebuild that trust, but especially in the Black community, if it was severed before, it's like a lot worse. And the efforts to bring that back, I'm not sure if that's been collectively done. I still think there's opportunities there, and I think that's where that locks in. So when we're going to talk about the community and doing all these different projects and whatnot, that's what I'm trying to establish. I'm just trying to establish that trust again, where you can come in and talk, you can have those conversations, I can have those real conversations, because I also believe that in medicine we have to be okay with telling the truth of certain things. I have this statement that I say, research is not the same as reality. Meaning that while the stats say 90% or whatever, you might be the 2 or 3% that doesn't fit that, and I have to be okay with having that conversation with you. And sometimes we don't allow room for that, right? So
no,
I was going to say that comes to doing some of the work. That's a big part of it. When you're connecting with people, and they're like, hey, diabetes is the biggest. Oh, statins, for hypercholesterolemia.
Yeah.
Lots of patients coming in, I read, my friend told me this, statins are bad for you, this, that, or the other, and I'll listen. I was like, okay, tell me more.
Mm-hmm.
And I spend time asking them, okay, but you've been on this for how long, and what? Let me understand, and how, versus the research says blah, you know what I mean? So it's like, really, we need to be better at rebuilding that trust,
Yeah.
each person at a time. And I think that's a big part, that once we have that perception of building trust, everything else will fall into place.
Yeah, the information will be digested a lot better because without trust is nothing, right? We're dealing with a community that has been strategically marginalized for 400 plus years.
Mm-hmm.
I constantly repeat that so people could drive in their head. This is not something that just happened from yesterday. It didn't happen in COVID. It didn't happen in 1990. It didn't happen in 1950. We're going 400 years back, and there's constantly post-traumatic slave depression that is also like constantly or post-traumatic slave disorder that's constantly hitting us, right? Because there's such mental slavery that Marcus Garvey spoke about, that mental slavery that Bob Marley sang about. That is real and it's so intricate. We don't even realize the different pillars that we have to break down, and restructuring that trust is something so important. So when we sit down, we look at it and we tell someone about the same statins, right? As a physician, our goal is not to have 3,000 patients. And I want people to realize that as a doctor, our goal is not to have 3,000 patients. Our goal is to know that the 3,000 people that exist within our community, they're healthy, right? That's the true goal of when you get into medicine, that the persons that are within your capture, they are healthy. They can come to you and be healthy.
But watch this now. When you talk about healthy, how do you define that?
Well, healthy depends on what is the social determinants of health. There's so many different things that have the intersectionality to what healthy determines. And I always say as well, and I keep saying that word, but like black health doesn't have a true definition because black health is what you are in your moment at that time, at that space and time, and how you feel to it. So black health for me might be solitude, right? It might be walking off into the woods and sitting down with nature and having no conversation with anyone. Black health might be for you to spending time with a bunch of family, right? And having conversations and sharing stories, right? Two can exist, but doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with that, right? So when we really approach the community, we really try to find out where their health is at, or where the health is in their life at that time. So when you may go to churches, right? The watering holes, you may go to all these different areas and have that conversation with them. So the question that I want to pose now is that when you go to the community, right? How do you define that community? How are you able to relate? How do you even let that community know the importance of community within their health?
Yeah, so going back to Dixon, and this, you'll see the application here. When I was in Dixon, most of the physicians there, except for the Canadian ones, were brought up in Dixon or close by. They were brought. They went to high school there. They went to college, university, med school, did their rotations and everything there. I found that coming back, it was important for me to stay in Durham. So I was when I came to Canada when I was 13. I lived in Scarborough for most of my life, and then in my early adult years, I moved to Durham, and I really put down anchors here and stakes here, and really called it my home. And I found that it was important to come back because I knew the people that I connected with in the space of community community services, and I wanted to have them be a part of the work that I'm doing. And that's the part that I think, when we talk about the community, how do we get it done? It's you have to talk to people, you have to connect with people, you have to understand. The people will kind of help you understand what the limitations of community is, right? For example, I can't say I know it extremely well, but I know people who've been here in different parts of the community in Durham, and I spend time with them. You talk about watering holes or water holes. I think churches, mosques, community centers are very important places to start with, because you'll find that the people that are really locked into the community, these are the places that they go. And people, so they go to work and they go to school, but coming around Saturday and Sunday, they gravitate to these places because in our culture, most Black cultures, communities see that as a spot where you stop for a little bit, you connect with people in a certain way, and then you move through. So for me to have an impact and to have that connection, why would I think it's not appropriate for me to be in that space too, right? So that I take that opportunity, and I think churches have a big part of outlining what the community looks like. I think community events have a lot to do with that too. There's a very, I would say, develop and enrich community engagement program. When I say Durham region, like I see the effort. Like it's very clear. You know, unfortunately, when I was younger, I didn't connect with Toronto the way I did. But I have my family, my friends that I would say, okay, this is happening at um, the Ajax Convention Center. This is happening here. Come, let's go check it out. And we're going out to these things, which is refreshing because I don't think that's something that's across the board in all areas of Toronto and all the other places, right? It might be in certain pockets. So that's what I think helps to design what the community looks like. And again, it goes back to understanding the person. So I don't think all Black people are the same, right? So I have, when we talk about Black health and Black communities, that in itself, we have to be very mindful of how, and I try not to define it, but I have the people that I'm in that space define it, because there's sometimes I'm in Whitby. For example, I was at an event in Whitby by the Ability Center, and the group that's there, I've never seen them before. But then I'll go to Ajax, it's a different group of people, and sometimes there's cross pollination, but there's the things that the people in Whitby will go to and what they're trying to attend to, and their needs are actually different from the needs of those in Ajax Pickering, and it's being present for those, right? So I can't say I see it naturally happening, the definition of the community authentically happening with the people that are there, and I just soak it up. I just listen, and I observe, and I think that's the best way that works for me.
And you did mention family and making sure that you also put your family.
Yeah, of course.
So that's the true buy-in, right? I had the opportunity to meet some of your family.
Yeah.
And this is the importance of family and within the Black community. And I see that you pour into them and they pour into you to be able to walk out into the community and be able to deal or to be in front of so many different qualities that our community can give. Right? Rather be happy or not. So then, what's the importance of family for you within that? Right? You mentioned you went into medicine late. You had support of your wife to go into it. I can imagine at that point you're like, oh, I got to set up life and whatever the case is, and it hasn't been linear, right, to that aspect. So like, what is the importance of family within that? And because family is community, so that what's the importance of family to health?
Yes. So, I once I made a decision to get into medicine, that's when I actually found out how important family was, because there were people that sacrificed their safe space to do medicine. They would. I know people who came in and they had their families, and by the time they were done med school or residency, family broke up. They left certain friends, and when they go back, the friends are not there as they thought they would be there. And I guess as a benefit for me, I got into medicine at a later stage in life where I already had some of those roots already there. I think family is so, as a Black man growing up and maturing, it's so important. Like and I can't tell you, there are days where I need to be tethered to reality, and my reality is my family. So when you say important, how I'm a people watcher. Yeah, I'm a people watcher. I have lots of kids. I have lots of nieces and nephews, and I'll just sit there and watch them. Because seeing them smile, seeing them happy, seeing them connecting with each other, that is important to me. And that's why I do community medicine, because I want to be able to say, hey, go to this resource because they're going to help you out, when you get older. But also to have them understand agency. You live here. This place, yes, your parents were able to do things to have you go to school and have resources and whatnot. But you have to give back. That's your true currency. That's your true worth and your weight, where you could say, I live here. This is my space. And so when you have certain conversations, let's say we have concerns around equity, you can't talk about equity if you haven't.
Tried
You
these
haven't, yeah,
programs,
right. You haven't been involved with it.
Mhm.
So to me, that's why family is so important. Yes, it's in my four walls of the house, but
Mhm.
they also know that the community that you're in, it's an extension of the family, right?
Mhm.
So to me, it's very important. It kind of reminds it's that's the payoff at the end of the day when I have a 16-hour day. I come home and I see them and they're, hey, daddy, or my wife's like, hun, you're back home, and everybody's good. That to me is the trade off, and it's very important,
Yeah,
very important.
and that refusal. So just to pivot a little bit, we speak about the difficulties it is to, or the difficulties that exist to take it into the community. Like when we talk about different chronic diseases,
Mm-hmm.
right? Non-communicable chronic diseases, for example, diabetes, hypertension,
Mm-hmm.
prostate cancer, other cancers, breast cancer, whatever the case is. How do we, as physicians, that are trying to create a link to the community, how do we have those conversations, those difficult conversations with those persons that may be experiencing what maybe signs of dementia, but because it's our culture, it's like, I just forgetful, or I can't bother, I can't afford to lose a day of work because I have a family to feed, or I got to keep a
Mm-hmm.
roof over my head, or I don't want no one to think that I'm weak at work, or I don't want my family to think that I'm going to be a burden. How do we start to really create those conversations?
Yeah, so we haven't done a good job in a little bit in Canada around, or I should say Ontario, around preventative health. Because we're still catching up after COVID and trying to address those issues that weren't addressed during that time. We haven't switched gears into where, okay, how do we prevent things from happening? So those things do best when we start talking about prevention.
Mhm.
With, uh, our community, um, I think worked well for me was symptoms,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Symptoms. I don't, if you talk about, when I teach in an academic setting, or we're doing case reviews and whatnot. I love diabetes as a case study or a case review because there's so many learning opportunities with complications that go with diabetes that the physician gets to really understand them. They
Mhm.
understand why it's important to really take care of patients that have type 2 diabetes, right? Because there's so many things that could go wrong. While it happens slowly and it doesn't happen all at once, right? So I find that it's important to work with the patient to have them understand the symptoms. So what I do, for example, and I don't want to say it's a scare tactic, but it's the reality of what can happen.
The unfiltered view.
That's right. And so I'll say what I tend to say. I give my experience. I try not to get the textbook lensy, but I give them my experience. What I've seen before. I've seen people lose their lower extremities. I've seen people go blind. I see men, have erectile dysfunction. I see all these different things from this not being attended to. And I have that conversation very early. And I almost look them dead in the eye and I mention that to them. And I say to them, my job is to make sure we don't get there. And here's how we get there. The other part of this, too, I believe, um, not necessarily the reward, but the full scope of the conversation should be, okay, what am I working towards? Am I working towards taking meds for the rest of my life? For diabetes specifically, I do practice remission, where patients get to a point where they're managing it so well that they use diet, exercise, lifestyle changes, and lock in there, versus relying on medication. And I don't chastise those who are on medication. It's not a shaming thing. That's just your how the disease works. But I think the reality is people need to know the full scope of what options they have and what's happening. When it comes to the cancers, breast cancer, prostate cancer, colorectal cancer, cervical cancer, I express to them that we have resources in our time that allows us to get ahead of the game for treating these things. And I try to break it down for them, explain each component. So, for example, prostate cancer, a big thing around prostate cancer that a lot of men still need that education around is that the digital rectal exams while they're still part of the system there, that's not the only way to screen. And then I talk about screen versus diagnose and explain that. So I think what I do, I'm not sure if it's standard across the board, but what I practice, I use that one visit per year with all my patients, black, white, purple, and go over. We're going to talk about risk factors associated to you being 37, male, with family history of this, and we break it down. And I usually take that one time per year to do that. But it goes back to having that rapport, building that relationship. You can't talk about everything all at once, but it's very important. Every engagement that you have, there's a level of trust that's established with the patient.
And what is most important at the end of the day is that you could have those conversations. Like, one thing I realize we don't speak a lot within our community is the importance of sexual health, right? And it's not just for the women to go and get a pap smear or a regular checkup with a gynecologist, but the impact of diet within that for our women within our community that are suffering with PCOS and how the importance of that. And then for men, the importance of like your diet when it comes to sperm health, right? One thing you will mention to me is that in other communities, when they're deciding that they're ready to have a baby, it's not the woman just coming in.
No, the two of them.
The two of them come in and say, hey, what do we need to do to make sure that we have a successful birth? And one thing that a lot of people are now getting wind of education-wise is that how much of a role sperm plays within pregnancy outside of the fertilization of an egg, right? The health of the placenta throughout your whole pregnancy, that is based off of the diet and the health of the sperm of the father or the donor for that child. And how do we now start to have those conversations where we got to be also careful, because it's a community that has been so sexualized from young. How do we have those conversations that persons could feel, okay, now this is my empowerment to go ahead to make sure that I am doing the best for the offspring of my child to be from day one?
So it goes back to trust again. I'll give you an example. I have a patient that I think she has around 4 daughters, and they're between 16 and around 25. And they're all African descent, and they would come in, and she would come in with them, and she has no boys in her family, for kids, and they would come in, and the conversations I have with them, in my mind, I try to, and she's not a single parent, by the way. She has her husband and everything, but you could understand 5 if you live with 5 females. Yeah, like, it's like this is probably your guys' visit. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I would go in, and when I go in, I talk to mom a lot. I say mom, and they, sometimes they all come in, depending on where they are in their health. And I'll spend time with her and educate her. Start with mom first, because we know most communities in the Afro-Caribbean space, mom has the word when it comes to the culture of the family. Maintaining the health is the mom. So I spend time. If I win the trust of the mom, I have a window into the health that's going to happen. And when I say mom as far up as I can. So grandma, grandma, right up. Yes, I try to bring them in. I try to make sure if they co-sign and they understand, I feel like it's going to trickle down. And that's understand the community. But even from that, once the trust is there, I respect, in medicine, the age where you could come in and have conversations on your own start as 16, right? But again, understanding the community, I'm very mindful of the patients that I need to have their moms in there, right? Because you know the dynamics that's there. But I bring that family up because I found it to be very powerful, that trust engagement, that trust design, to the point where some of the things that we talked about, myself and mom, in her visit, she was able to pass on to the kids, and the kids will come in and say, hey, I'm here for this exam, or I'm here to talk about this, my boyfriend's doing this and we're trying to do this, and that's where it starts. So again, we cannot circumvent the power of trust. Always goes back to that, and also respecting that. While what I learned in the shelter system for young people is that our society in Canada, or in Ontario, I'll say, we push autonomy for as early as 16.
Mhm.
They have the fun day, this, that, they,
Mhm.
and we see that in the shelter system. But if we're going back to community and understanding the Afro-Caribbean community, while that might be the case, if you present as autonomy at 16, okay, go on.
16. I'm 33 and I don't talk much.
Yeah,
But
exactly, right?
talking about.
So, and there's again, understanding doesn't necessarily mean
Mhm.
that it's a broad brushy paint, right? But
Mhm.
it's taking the time, slowing things down,
Mhm.
and realizing that, does this person trust what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And also, trust should never be, in my opinion, where it's like a blanketed trust for everything.
Mhm.
You know, one of the things that young people are doing nowadays, which is very, very important. Like I see more young people coming in to do their annual checks, do their visits on their own. 19, 20.
Mhm.
I make sure I open up to say, bring in whatever conversations that you have. If you saw something online, I have a lot of young men asking about testosterone, right? And I'll march out that conversation. I have a lot of young men talking about sexual health,
Mhm.
and so I think again it goes back to trust. Trust is so important,
Oh,
so important.
one thing also we want to touch on as well. We had an opportunity to have a sit down, hopefully through the Black Health Committee's page. We posted because we had a couple community experience persons with lived experience to talk about sickle cell
Mm-hmm.
and how it affects us as a community and the importance of knowing your status.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When we hear knowing your status, we think about disease like HIV and AIDS.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Know your status, but really and truly, for a disease as like sickle cell, we should know our status, our thalassemia status, whatever the case may be, but
Mm-hmm.
also the importance of sickle cell and through the childbearing stage for women who have it, right? There's such a focus on adults and children, but what happens when those children become the adults that are ready to have children of their own? What are the stages that we need to have when it comes to discussion? How do we protect them when it comes to that? Like, could we dive in a little bit when you think about sickle cell, you think about the impact it has in the community, and then like, how do we educate our young women and young men when they're going for to have their own kids, how to deal and navigate within that?
Yeah. So sickle cell disease on the grand scheme of things, where we talk about conditions and pathology, is not commonplace or I don't think it's commonplace in a lot of the practices that we have out there, right? Like a lot of clinical practice or any experiences there. In fact, I have contingency probably of 0.5 of my percent of my panel
Mm-hmm.
that have sickle cell disease, well managed,
Mm-hmm.
and so on.
But question is,
Yeah.
how much of them or how many of them actually know their status if they're a carrier or not?
Right. So within the so you will have those from especially the African continent that will tell you they know their status,
Mhm.
not those that are here, right? And I don't think people understand to your point. I don't think people understand the life changing experience you'll have with a family member with sickle cell disease unless you start having that.
Mhm.
So I think the first step, which we're doing in the community, especially in Durham, Lake Region DCHC, Durham Community Health Center, they've come together
Mhm.
to have um, uh, an initiative that is meant to educate as many people as they can,
Mhm.
whether it be a provider, whether it be a community member, about sickle cell disease. And I think that's where it starts. There
Mhm.
needs to be a concentrated effort for that, and educating people on it. It's not only Black people like disease.
Mhm.
Like you talked about carrier versus trait versus all these different conversations that should be had.
Mhm.
And I think they should be had early
Mhm.
because the life that goes I don't have sickle cell disease. None of my family members do. But experiencing or seeing what the patients go through, hearing the stories, reading the cases, it's not an easy walk, man. It's
It's a
not.
hard
It's one
struggle,
filled
man.
with pain for a very, very long time.
Mhm.
And so I think it's important for education to be had. And that those two entities that I mentioned, I think it's a very good initiative to have where they're making that awareness known. Hopefully something like this platform that we're talking about health, people start asking their primary care providers about, sickle cell disease, just even more information. And I think that's where it's at right now. It's just building awareness, right? Other pathologies in that space, thalassemia doesn't have this, but similar effects could be had there. But I guess it's the conversation more of knowing your history. And I've heard you talk about it, I've talked about it, how in Afro-Caribbean cultures, the elders don't like to pass that history on, right? They don't like passing it on.
Right, man, you're talking to that because I am knowledgeable of medicine. I know what they have because I can see, oh, well, then that medication adds up to this.
Yes.
And then that happens. Like, oh, you're talking, so wait, huh?
Yeah.
Since when was this part of, okay, no, it makes sense. And I'm like point something percentage that may have that opportunity. So it's very important that not only have the trust between physician and but everybody have trust, man.
But I would have a critical eye to that population and be like, man, you guys should do better in this. But then I found out it makes sense, right? Because one, you don't already have that trust. You don't have a trust with medicine. Secondly, the literacy is not nobody's sitting down with you and explaining to you.
No,
patients will come in, they're on tablets. Why are you taking? I know why you're taking the medicine, but why are you taking? I don't know.
I don't know. They just give me it. This is for my heart. This is for this. This is for that. Like I just take it because the doctor said it, and that's maybe the blind trust. But that's how they lose trust because there's no one's taking the opportunity to allow the community to hold their health in their hands.
That's right.
Right. Everyone is keeping it to themselves. I had the opportunity to say it before. In Cuba, everyone has their own clinical history with them, so they could take it to anywhere they go, and they could sit and read it if they want to. Every single test, every single result, when in their next consult, everything is with them in their hands.
So to your point, what I was at another session there. What I out in the community, I did a talk on diabetes, and one of the things that I didn't get to do, but I wanted to bring up was in detail was the fact that we should have a binder. I'll have a binder that talk about your family history, your own personal history, your medication. It should talk about your goals for the next 12 months of your health. And when you go to the doctors, you're just like a journal, you're updating that. And yeah, you might want to do that for your kids, but as adults, you should be doing that, right? And I think things like this really changes the game. And I think that's another way that we could do it too. Maybe the parent is not willing to verbalize that to the kids or whatnot, what their health is, but you taking making it stop here and say, okay, you're the one that's going to do it, will change the game.
So before we close, because we're coming up to time, and the hour passed. I know we started a little bit late, but the hour goes so quickly. I just got 2 questions that you can answer for me quickly. One, what would you tell those listening today from all the different parts of the world and their different communities? What would you tell them to take away when it comes to community health? 2, for the next Dr. Kirk Stewart that might be out there sitting down thinking that it's too late for them, right? Or that they can't go into medicine now, or it might not be enough for them, or that haven't even started to think about medicine that might be young. What would you give them? The same how you would be able to give the advice to yourself if you were talking to yourself.
Yeah. So the first question is be tangible and present. If you're going out there and you're trying to connect to the community, you can't do it from a computer. You can't do it from your office. You have to go out there and talk to people. Connect with people. Let them hear you. You listen to them. The latter might be what you do most, anything else. But I find that many times we have community workers, community specialists, community health, whatever position they have, but nobody knows that they exist. So you have to be out there, especially as a physician. I see how it changes the mindset of communities when they could see, hey, you're not in your office. Yeah, because you're here, right? The second part is for someone who is looking to get into medicine, I think it's never too late, but there's a lot that you can give up, right? For me, I've had many awesome jobs. Like I mentioned, I was in the military. I thought that was the best job in the world. And then I got into medicine, and there's no better job than this. But it's a lot of sacrifice leading up to where you are. So I think what I would tell myself, the things that I know now, would be pace myself. Medicine is a tool to do the work. It is not the only way to do it. This is my tool in terms of connecting with people and building community. And if the tool that you want to sharpen, right, then you pursue it. But I don't think it takes away from being impactful in the community.
All right. Well, thank you today. Thank you for everything, man.
All right, man.
Appreciate it.
No worries.
So, guys, there we have it. We had a nice episode today looking at the importance of community health through the eyes of a physician with Dr. Kirk. We had the opportunity to really dive deep into the importance of community, how we can interconnect it, the importance of trust, and then the importance of knowing how to advocate and really move forward to better our own health. This is Black Health Unfiltered. We bring the nitty-gritty of what is Black health and talk about all the things that they don't want to tell us. What we're going to say next week, hopefully you get to see at 4:30 EST, and we will be on time as we will sit down and speak with a dietitian who has a lot of experience in advocating for those of the ACB or Afro-Caribbean Black community, where we look at a series we're going to start. The first part of the series has been making food your medicine before medicine becomes your food, and we're going to look at the impact of colonialism and how it has impacted our culture, and then the importance of breaking that concept to really accepting how we should move forward within our own connections, which is to our ancestors, our culture, who we are as a people. Even though we exist in the differences of everything, we have that connection, and a lot of it is food. I could tell you, I'm a big guy. There's a connection in everything when it goes to food. But with that being said, thank you all for joining in this week. I look forward to seeing you next week for more discussions here on Love Bay Radio. Remember to follow us at Love Bay Radio and follow Black Health Committee Ontario on Instagram, and look forward to our next discussion.